Hey Rebecca, what screen do you see?
I see just the first slide of the
Okay,
presentation.
okay, great. Thanks. The little green rectangle disappeared. Well, hello everyone. Good morning. Thanks for joining us for the Water Board's public webinar on the statewide general waste discharge requirements for winery process water. We call that order the order, winery order, statewide order, and so forth. For our purposes today, they all mean the same thing. And today, our webinar focus is on the Central Valley Regional Water Quality Control Board, or Region 5. And here we are today. This is the one right before the last webinar this summer for the winery order. So thank you so much for joining us. And we are recording the presentations today, just as a FYI. So a little bit about Zoom webinars. That's what we're using today to run this webinar. You can submit questions to the panel using the Q&A icon on the screen. You can have your closed captions turned on. You can also use the leave the webinar if you have something else going on. And then you come in on a webinar on mute with your camera off automatically. And when you submit a question, you won't be seeing the answer. We're going to be doing those verbal at the end during the Q&A session. So I'm with the State Water Board Waste Discharge Requirements, or WDR program. I'm joined today, and my name's Laurel Wardrop. I'm joined today by Jennifer Chen, who's a water resource control engineer in WDRs, as well as Rebecca Greiner, who's an environmental scientist. And we're also joined by the Central Valley Regional Board WDR team, and they will be doing individual introductions later during the presentation. So the webinar today, we're going to go a little bit through the general basis of the order, and then the region's going to go through more detailed about their implementation in Region 5. Then we're going to do a little wrap on that, take a short break, and then we'll go right into the live Q&A. So just a little bit about the water boards before we get into the winery order. We get confused a lot with the Department of Water Resources, but we're the water boards, and we have the State Water Resources Control Board as well as 9 regional water quality control boards. And think of us as the water quality agency, and DWR focuses a lot in supply. So the regional boards are semi-autonomous entities, and they have jurisdiction over the geographical areas shown on the map. But collectively, the water board's mission is to protect water quality for beneficial uses such as swimming, fishing, drinking water. And we do that through a lot of different regulatory mechanisms, where waste discharge requirements are one of those. And they are established, our authorities are established in the federal and state law across many different programs. And, the requirement to report your waste discharges to land under WDRs comes from the California Water Code. There are thousands of WDRs statewide, and winery waste discharges to land are one of those. And there are already several regional WDRs for winery waste discharges to land, but today we're focusing on the statewide winery order adopted in 2021. So there's a lot of different programs, a lot of different offices in the water boards, and we do coordinate and work together. But you can think of State Board, where I'm from, is kind of the headquarters, and we do a lot of foundational support for the different programs and on implementation of these statewide orders like the winery order. And then the regions primarily oversee or conduct permit reviews, approvals, inspections, enforcement, and each region has a specific way of doing things to implement their region-specific basin plan, and how they apply like statewide projects like the winery order. So if you're not sure what regional jurisdiction your site's in, you can use our water board map tool to search for your region by address location. And I'll put the link in the chat, and it'll be available in the slides when we post them. So thank you so much, and I'll hand this over to Jennifer Chen.
Thanks, Laurel. Welcome, everyone. I'm Jennifer at the State Water Board. Let's first talk a little bit about why we're doing these webinars. The winery order was adopted in 2021, so that means we're now in the implementation phase. We're actively accepting applications, and we're enrolling wineries. Over the last few years, we've done a lot of outreach We've sent letters to wineries, we made an eligibility survey, we've done recommendations, and now we're doing this series of webinars. We also have more outreach planned for later this year, and you'll hear more about that in a little bit. We've also been answering a lot of questions, and we often get the same or similar ones. We recognize that we have a mix of winery distributors. Some of you may be more comfortable and experienced with WDRs or waste discharge requirements. Some of you may be familiar to the water board's permitting in general, but maybe not specifically WDRs. And some of you may be brand new to the water board's WDR program or winery order specifically. Our target audience for these webinars are those familiar with the winery's operations and those that will be doing the actual implementation work, like the application. For example, these might be the winery owners, operators, and maybe even environmental compliance officers for those larger wineries or the ones with multiple locations. These are also the industry professionals, like consultants and industry groups. So the focus here really is, what do I need to do? When do I do it? And what comes next? And if I need help, who do I talk to? So the purpose of these webinars really is to help get everyone on the same page. We want to try to answer these frequently asked questions. We want to help inform and prepare dischargers and reduce confusion around the order. And also, really importantly, we want to provide resources. So you have what you need, or at least you know where to find it when you do need it. A question we get a lot is, don't I already have a permit? So let's talk about how the winery order fits into the water board's world. The WDR program issues and manages permits and conditional waivers related to wastewater discharges to land to protect water quality. So the WDR program is one of many programs within the water boards. These are all separate programs and each has its own water quality concerns. So for example, there's stormwater, irrigated lands, recycled water, and many more. A winery will need separate permits from all the programs applicable to that winery's operations. The winery order is one permit out of many permits within the WDR program. So keep in mind that there is not a winery program or a winery order program. It's the WDR program. The winery order was adopted by the state board, but is implemented by the regional boards. It's a statewide general order, and that means that the same permit can be used by all the regions for wineries throughout California. This is different from a regional general order, which is a permit that can only be used for wineries within a certain region's certain regional board boundaries. So as you heard earlier, we coordinate. The state board and regional boards work together closely on the winery order, but we do each have our own separate roles. The state board provides information and tools that can be used statewide, and we also help answer general questions. The regional boards, on the other hand, are the winery's direct contact. The regions are the ones who can answer your site-specific or region-specific questions. They're the ones that will review your permit application, and they also oversee the winery order compliance. So if you email the state board mailbox, you'll notice that we'll often give you an answer. We might also suggest that you contact the regional board. This is so you can discuss any specifics to your site and to also begin building that relationship with them. A question we get a lot is, where do I start? How do I get started? So first, take a look at the winery order. Try to figure out if you're eligible and if you need coverage by looking at the definitions and the tier breakdown within the order. Determine your tier. Calculate, measure, project the amount of winery processed water you'll be discharging every year. Remember, when we say discharge, we're talking about discharge to land. That's processed water going into a pond, being land applied for reuse, or discharged to a subsurface disposal area. I do want to highlight the word project because you want to look at how much processed water you're discharging now, but also think about whether this amount will change in the short or the long term. If you're still unsure or you just want to confirm, you can always fill out the eligibility survey on the winery order website. When do I apply? If you're an existing winery with no WDRs, apply now. If you already have individual WDRs, a conditional waiver, or you're already covered by a regional general order, you can either apply now or see what the deadlines are for your region's enrollment priority. If you've already been notified by the regional board to either apply or transfer over from an existing permit, look at the deadline in that notice. If you're a brand new winery, you have to apply. You have to apply for coverage at least 180 days before you begin operations. This is because you need authorization to discharge your winery processed water. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about things to consider as you begin planning. First, assess and gather information for your winery facility or site as it currently stands. Now think about any facility or process changes you have planned and when you expect to do them. So for example, are you planning to grow your operations or maybe put in a pond? What we're talking about here are material changes. A material change is something that will change the character, location, or volume of your discharge. If you have one of these changes, you're required to notify the regional board before you make this type of change and to submit a new application. Next, compare requirements. What are the winery order requirements for your current facility and how will they change after you make your facility improvements? So for example, if you're in tier 2 now, maybe after you expand production, you'll be in tier 3, or maybe you'll find out that you'll still be in tier 2. So you have to decide for yourself whether it makes sense to apply for your current facility and then submit a future application with the future changes, or if it makes sense to include all the plan changes into one application now. So are you thinking about increasing production in 2 years or 20 years? A helpful tool to help you compare scenarios and the different permit requirements is the compliance calendar tool on the winery order website. It's a spreadsheet where you can select your tier, your site features, and whether it's new or existing, and it'll show you which winery order requirements would apply and also their deadline. Okay, now that you're ready to apply, how do you apply? The winery order has an application section with all the enrollment details. The application itself has 3 parts: the notice of intent, the technical report, and the filing fee, and that's equal to the annual permitting fee. If you're an existing winery, you also have an extra piece. These discharges need to propose a compliance schedule and include it in your technical report, which the regional board will review. This proposed compliance schedule lays out any facility improvements or changes that need to be made to bring your facility into full compliance of the order. So take a look at the technical provision section in the order for any specific upgrades and their deadlines to see if they apply to your site. So keep in mind, this compliance schedule is only for existing wineries, which are those that began operations before the order was adopted on January 20th, 2021. Anything new that you're constructing, or if you're a new facility, is expected to already be fully compliant with the winery order. So we often get questions about turnaround time. The question really is, when will I be enrolled? And the short answer to that is it depends. Since when you get enrolled can be affected by factors specific to your site or maybe specific to your region. One of the goals of these webinars actually is to help improve turnaround time. We want to give you the information and resources you need to submit more complete applications. So after you apply, it's important to keep an eye out for data requests from the regional boards because it's pretty common for the regions to ask for missing or more detailed information that's needed to complete your application. If you do these things, it'll really help the regional board review your application more quickly, determine that it's complete, and to issue you the Notice of Applicability, or NOA, which is what authorizes you to discharge your winery waste. Lastly, what if I still have questions? Where can I get more help? Start with the winery order website. There's a lot of detailed information there. You'll find resources, tools, guides, and links to other things. You'll also find contact information for the state board and the regional boards. You can also email the state board winery mailbox with any general questions you have related to the order. And also you can email your particular regional board with any questions related to your facility. Or if you want to know about a specific region's procedure or requirement. Another option is you can reach out for external support, such as other wineries in your area, winery groups, industry groups, or consultants. It's a great way to exchange information. There's also a few instances where you may need a professional certification or professional signature to comply with a winery order. The important thing here is to be informed. Know your facility, get familiar with your order requirements and what applies to your site, and it'll really help you find the right help. Okay, now we're narrowing in on the order. We've talked about the water boards, the WDR program, and how to get started. Let's take a look now at the winery order itself. So we're often asked, why is the order so long? And do I need to do everything that's required in it? So part of the reason the winery order is so long is because it contains a lot of flexibility. That flexibility was intentional and also by request because every winery does things a little differently. The order covers multiple treatment disposal options. It has requirement off-ramps. It also has triggers. That means there are requirements that are not active and may never become active unless something triggers it. The order also has extended timeframes for planning and for bringing existing wineries into full compliance. So it's pretty rare, but not impossible, but it would be unusual for one winery where all the order requirements are applicable to it. That would mean your facility uses all the treatment disposal options. You didn't or couldn't take any of the off-ramps, and you somehow triggered all the additional requirements. So it's pretty rare. The winery order is structured such that the requirements fall into these overarching categories. They're usually taken sequentially and will funnel you into the appropriate requirements for your site. So the top level split is your tier. Is your winery exempt or in tiers 1, 2, 3, or 4? Next, what disposal methods do you use at your site? If you have a pond, for example, look at those requirements. If you don't have a subsurface disposal, you can skip those requirements. Also, when did your winery begin operating? Is it considered an existing or new facility? Are you applying because you're expanding something? Next, are you discharging processed water, processed solids to land, or both? So look at those appropriate requirements. There are also water quality considerations. So for example, there could be water quality sampling results that trigger additional monitoring or maybe additional reporting, like a salt or nitrogen control plan. Okay, let's take a look at the winery order itself. You may have noticed that the order itself doesn't have traditional sections or chapter numbers. That's because it's structured so that each individual requirement has a unique identifier, so we can refer to that requirement directly. The identifier is made up of alternating numbers and letters, and each sub-level is also indented for that visual reminder. So keep in mind that these paragraphs can sometimes get a little long, so you may have to look either back up the page or even back a couple of pages to find the top level of that requirement. So here's a couple examples. This first one is from findings. The call out is winery order, page 3, findings 12, subpart A, and it's referring to this orange box. And just because of the sentence structure, it includes parts 1 through 4. This next example is from discharge specifications, and it just happens to be one that has a lot of sublevels. The requirement here is that green box, and it has the call out beginning with page 36, part D, point 1, point A, point II, point C, point 1. So you can see how these can get pretty inset. Okay, let's talk a little bit about navigating the order itself. So feel free, and I would never discourage you from reading the order from cover to cover, but it's pretty long and we're talking about getting started. So start with the table of contents. It'll help you find what you need. And once you get more familiar with it, please use the keyword search feature within the PDF file. So the order has 3 main parts: findings, hereby ordered, and certification. Findings has all the background information, rationale, detailed descriptions, and hereby ordered has what to do, what not to do, and also compliance timeframes and milestones. Then you also, when you first get started, you want to look at the applicability and application sections, which is under findings. Take a look at these orange arrows because they apply to all the facilities. In applicability, you'll find the definition for winery waste, how the tiers are determined, and the cutoffs for the different tiers. In the application section, you'll find details on how to apply, what enrollment means, and it describes the notice of applicability and its pieces. These green arrows refer to sections that only apply if you have certain features, for example, a pond or an application area. So as you're reading through the order, keep those overarching categories in mind for your facility. So requirements are organized by those categories. So please pay attention to the heading names and also the beginning of requirements, because it'll tell you whether it's for an existing or new facility, or maybe only applies to tier 2 or tier 4, etc. The hereby ordered section is set up the same way. The discharge prohibitions apply to everyone. And also when you look at the effluent limitations, discharge specifications, and provisions, you'll see that some of those sections are for everyone, but some also only apply if you're in a specific category. I do want to point out that there are two discharge specification sections, one for only Tier 1 and one for Tiers 2, 3, and 4. Also keep in mind that the technical provision section has compliance timeframes for certain facility improvements and also requirements that come into play if you trigger something. So lastly, take a look at the attachments. Initially, focus in on attachments A, B, C, and G. These are the glossary, notice of intent, technical report outline, and the monitoring and reporting program. So it's really important, especially for the technical report and the monitoring and reporting program. Keep those categories in mind so you're looking at the right sections for your site. All right, so with that, thank you, and here's Rebecca.
Good morning, everyone. My name's Rebecca Greiner, and I'm an environmental scientist at the State Board with waste discharge requirements. So far we've looking at the winery order, when to apply, and then how do I start planning. Now we will touch a little bit more on how to apply and where to get help if it's needed. So as Jen mentioned earlier, the beginning of the process is for the discharger to submit an application package. This is comprised of the electronic notice of intent, which is submitted via the California Integrated Water Quality System, or CWICS. The application package also includes the technical report, which is required for all wineries. This is part of the electronic notice of intent in CWICS. There might be other supporting documents which will also be attached there. And the third and final part is a signed notice of intent, and the fee. The application fee is equal to the annual fee, which Jen had mentioned earlier. A signed copy of the notice of intent is submitted to the regional board. It is important that the correct person signs the document. Information on this can be found in the help guide, and I'll show you kind of where that is momentarily. So after you submit your notice of intent, the regional board will review your application package, and they'll reach out as needed. As Jen said, it's important that you get back with your responses as soon as possible, as this will help with the enrollment process and the timeline. Once the review is complete, the regional board will issue a notice of applicability. This notice of applicability includes the tier that the winery is in, a monitoring and reporting program, as well as, if relevant and needed, an approved compliance schedule for existing facilities. So in summary, you'll submit your electronic notice of intent with all the documentation, the signed notice of intent, and your fee. The regional board will review all of that and then issue a notice of applicability confirming your enrollment underneath the winery order. So the electronic notice of intent is done via the California Integrated Water Quality System, also CWICS. In this box here, in the orange boxes, you'll see the form ID. This is an extremely important number, so take note of it. It is used throughout the entire enrollment process, especially with fee payments. It is also used if you need to come back and resubmit or continue your electronic notice of intent. Information on that is found on the winery order website in the help guide, also linked here on this slide. The two orange arrows are showing the questionnaire and attachments tabs. The questionnaires will answer questions such as about your ponds, your subsurface disposal, and the attachments is where the technical report must be attached. If you do not attach a technical report, an error will pop up when you do your form completeness check, and you will not be able to submit your notice of intent. The notice of intent must be completed on CWIX, and the only thing that should be submitted via email or physical mail is the signed notice of intent. Again, information on that and how to do that is included in the help guide. It is extremely important that you take a look at that document to make sure you have all of the pieces together. It's been mentioned a few times, but the technical report is required for all facilities and wineries enrolling in the winery order. Attachment C has an outline of the technical report by tiers. Jen had shown kind of earlier, so take a look at that. And it is required again. Shown here is the attachments tab where you'll upload your technical report, as well as an example of the error that will appear if you do not do so when you try and submit. We do have a dedicated winery order website that is kept updated quite frequently with new information. Here is a QR code that you can scan with your phone, as well as the URL. This is where you will also sign up for our electronic mailing list. These are sent out when for example, when the recordings for these webinars are posted and the slides are posted, or if there are future webinars, things of that sort. So be sure to sign up for that for additional information. So the winery order website is split up into tabs. So here we have the enrollment and fees tab, the resources tab, and then there is a winery order contacts tab. Listed here are the resources that are available. Your two main resources for enrollment will be the Notice of Intent Help Guide and the Fee Payment Help Guide that are on the Enrollment and Fees tab. The Fee Payment Help Guide will help ensure that everything is processed smoothly, and then the Notice of Intent has additional information, or the Notice of Intent Help Guide has additional information and explanations. So when you have a moment, take a look at those, as they may answer some questions that do pop up. And the Winery Order Contacts tab has the email addresses for each of the winery inboxes. In this case, you'll be looking at the Central Valley Water Board. Each of the 3 offices has their own email address, so be sure that you're using the correct one for your region. As Laurel had linked earlier, there is the map tool you can use. It's also linked here as well. And with that, I will pass it over to the Central Valley Regional Board staff.
Thank you, Rebecca. Let me share my screen here. Okay, can you see my screen? Okay, very good. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us today for this discussion about winery discharge permitting in the Central Valley. My name is Scott Armstrong, and I am a senior engineering geologist here in the Rancho Cordova office of the Central Valley Regional Water Quality Control Board. I manage one of our 3 permitting units for waste discharge to land, which is also commonly referred to as WDRs, or waste discharge requirements. And occasionally you might hear the term non-15 as well. You'll be hearing from a few of our team members after this presentation. This map of California shows the geographic coverage of the Water Board's 9 regions, with the Central Valley Board being the largest, covering about 40% of the state. Regional board boundaries are defined by watershed basins, meaning that sometimes a county may have a split water board coverage between 2 regions. This is the case with Napa County, El Dorado County, Kern County, and a few others. The Central Valley Water Board has 3 offices, one in Redding, one in Rancho Cordova, and one in Fresno, to cover the diversity of land uses and water quality issues across this region. Each of our 3 Central Valley offices provide permitting staff for the county shown here. The table on the right lists our permitting staff in each of our offices, and our program manager is Alex Mishagan, who is based in our Fresno office. Contact information for each office will be provided at the end of this presentation, and the slides will also be available. Since the previous presentation by Jennifer and Rebecca covered what the winery order includes, I'm going to spend some time the next few minutes discussing how winery permitting is coordinated here in the Central Valley. We will cover the applicable permit mechanisms and the application process. In the Central Valley, wineries may be subject to 3 types of water board permits. First, we have waste discharge requirements, WDRs, which regulate winery process water discharge to land for beneficial uses, discharges to ponds and/or land application areas, or for subsurface disposal. Wineries may also be subject to permits from our stormwater program in the form of a construction general permit, which regulates stormwater discharges from construction sites and discharges where projects disturb 1 or more acre of land, or the industrial general permit, which regulates stormwater discharges associated with industrial activities. In addition, the Irrigated Lands Regulatory Program regulates commercial irrigated agriculture operations, including nurseries. Operations for regulatory coverage include joining a third-party coalition or obtaining individual waste discharge requirements. More information on the stormwater and irrigated lands regulatory programs can be found on their respective program web pages and through the context names listed here. Now let's focus on available permitting options for winery discharges in the Central Valley. Wineries in the Central Valley are currently either permitted under individual site-specific permits, called WDRs, or are enrolled under our waiver for small food processors, wineries, and related agricultural processors. This is such a long name, we're going to condense it down to the winery waiver for this presentation. The winery order is a relatively new permit mechanism compared to our existing permit mechanisms. Individual WDRs generally apply to wineries that discharge over 1 million gallons per year to land and do not qualify for coverage under the winery waiver. These permits are written specifically for each facility, which is a lengthy process and includes adoption at one of our board meetings that occur 6 times a year. WDRs are periodically updated as needed to reflect changes in winery operations, such as flow increases, changes in wastewater characteristics, or changes to land application practices. Most wineries that discharge less than 1 million gallons per year to land are covered under our winery waiver. Enrollment under the waiver is divided into 3 regulatory tiers based on the amount of waste discharged to land. What's important to note here is that the waiver will expire early next year. This means that any winery currently enrolled under the waiver will need to either enroll for coverage under the winery order or apply for individual WDRs to maintain an active discharge permit. Moving forward, we are no longer enrolling wineries under the winery waiver and are focusing on enrollments under the winery order or preparing individual WDRs. Here's a breakdown of the number of permitted wineries in the Central Valley, currently either under site-specific WDRs or enrollment under the winery waiver. According to wine industry statistics compiled by the State Water Board, there are an estimated 6,200 bonded wineries established throughout the state of California. Although many of these wineries are currently operating under appropriate permitting, many are not. It is estimated that around 1,200 operating wineries within the entire state may be discharging winery waste without a permit. Because the Central Valley represents a significant portion of wine production operations in the state, we are aware that there may be many unpermitted wineries in this region. We currently have a small number of applications to enroll in the winery order, but nothing close to the estimated number of unpermitted operations that we anticipate in this region. Operating without appropriate discharge permitting exposes businesses to liabilities, including enforcement, corrective action, and potential fines. This is why now is a good time to begin the permit application process for enrollment under the winery order. So now let's take a look at the available winery discharge permitting options in the Central Valley. As mentioned previously, Central Valley wineries with existing permits are either covered under individual WDRs or our regional winery waiver. Let's first address the existing permittees. If your facility is covered under an individual WDR and your wastewater discharge flow exceeds 15 million gallons annually, then your winery will continue to be permitted under the individual WDR because your annual discharge flow exceeds coverage under the winery order. Wineries discharging more than 15 million gallons per year will continue to require individual WDRs. If your permitted flow under a WDR is under 15 million gallons annually, there's nothing for you to do right now aside from staying in compliance with the requirements outlined in your WDR. Next, if your facility is covered under the winery waiver and your wastewater flows are less than 10,000 gallons a year, your facility is going to be exempt under the winery order. If you fall under this situation, please go to the winery order webpage and complete the survey. This exercise will provide us with a record of your facility for exempt status in our permitting program. Wineries currently discharging between 10,000 and 1 million gallons of wastewater a year that are currently enrolled under the waiver will require enrollment under the winery order. As noted before, the winery waiver expires in February 2025, at which time, if you are not enrolled under the winery order or registered as an exempt status or under WDRs, your winery discharge will be unpermitted. And as noted before, it is important that wineries discharging less than 10,000 gallons per year complete the online survey, as that will provide the documentation for your exempt status. Any unpermitted facility with ongoing discharge may be exposed to potential enforcement actions and fines. Before going much further, it's worth discussing a comparison of the tier structure between the winery waiver and the winery order. The waiver characterizes wineries into tiers based on annual wastewater flow volumes, which is similar but different to the winery order. The flow volumes associated with the tiers below in the two permit models are not exactly the same. Tier levels in the winery order include more detailed discharge specifications than the winery waiver, which makes it important to review these requirements while going through the permit application process. Enrollees under the winery waiver migrating over to the winery order will also notice a change in the annual fee structure. Your designated permit writer will provide more in-depth information about fee rates during the permit application process. Finally, let's discuss those wineries that are currently discharging without a permit. If your wastewater flows are greater than 15 million gallons annually, your winery will require individual WDRs. For this pathway, please contact Central Valley Water Board staff to begin that permitting process. If your annual wastewater discharge is between 10,000 gallons and 15 million gallons per year, then you will qualify for coverage under the winery order, which we will discuss in the next few slides. And lastly, if your wastewater discharge is less than 10,000 gallons per year, or you tank and haul your waste off-site, then your winery is considered exempt from discharge permitting. But as I've mentioned a couple of times here, it is really important that exempt wineries complete the online survey, as this will provide the documentation of your status. Also, in the future, if your winery increases annual wastewater flows, then you will need to enroll for coverage under the general order or apply for individual WDRs. Now let's briefly summarize the application submittal process. As Jen and Rebecca mentioned earlier, there's a three-step application process. The first step is to go to the winery order website, complete either the electronic notice of intent or ENOI on the webpage, or contact Central Valley Water Board staff for a fillable PDF of the NOI form. Then complete and submit the technical report electronically and submit the fee. You will need to talk to your permit writer to determine the application fee amount. And the website is also the place to see that eligibility form for dischargers that are under 10,000 gallons a year. In summary, the application consisting of the NOI, the technical report, and the fee can either be submitted via the Winery Order webpage or emailed to one of the 3 Central Valley Water Board winery email addresses listed here. Also, when submitting your completed application, we encourage you to include your regional board permit writer as a CC. Here we wanted to provide you with a sense of how the permitting process works, so you're not surprised or frustrated if you get comments back during our review of your application. After your application is submitted, either as an electronic NOI or via email, permitting staff are assigned based on county and staff availability. Staff will review the application for completeness. If we need more information or clarification, we will reach out to you. This is shown by the dotted line, as an application sometimes gets sent back for more information. And it is very common for staff to have some questions or comments about the application. Next, staff conducts a technical review to assess the permit compliance, reviewing designs and evaluating the compliance schedules. There are also times where we may want to come out and observe your operations to get a better understanding of your discharge. And I want to emphasize that these site visits are specifically for our permitting staff to understand how you operate as we develop permits. In addition to conducting a site visit, permitting staff will also provide enrollment information about CV salts, which will need to be completed before a permit can be issued. And we'll cover CV salts here in a little bit. Finally, a notice of applicability, or NOA, is prepared, reviewed, and issued by the Central Valley Water Board Executive Officer. The NOAA includes site-specific information, tier level, reuse or disposal method, and monitoring requirements specific to our region for each tier. The winery order provides example monitoring reporting requirements. So the timeline to review your application may take several weeks to a few months, depending on staff availability and backlog. And as mentioned before, if we need more information or clarification, we will reach out to you. The Central Valley Water Board's first priority is to focus on currently unpermitted wineries and those wineries that are currently enrolled under the waiver, because those wineries will be unpermitted when the waiver expires early next year. After all application information has been reviewed, staff will prepare a notice of applicability that describes the specific requirements for your facility. A monitoring and reporting plan will also be attached to the NOAA that's specific to your tier and the type of wastewater treatment process you have. And lastly, as noted before, the NOAA cannot be issued until the discharger has selected their enrollment pathway in CV salts, which we'll cover next. Okay, this is our last technical topic to cover before wrapping up. The next few slides are mainly intended for wineries that are not currently permitted that discharge more than 10,000 gallons per year. There are currently no changes for wineries that are already permitted and enrolled in CV salts. Wineries currently enrolled under the winery waiver will retain their same CV salt selections after enrolling under the general order. All discharges permitted in the Central Valley are required to participate in CV salts, which stands for the Central Valley Salinity Alternatives for Long-Term Sustainability. Through the CV Salts Initiative, 2 new programs were adopted in 2018 and became effective in January of 2020. And those are the salt and nitrate control programs. These programs changed our approach in how we permit discharges of salt and nitrate to address the long-term impact of salinity and nitrate issues in Central Valley groundwater. The goal of this program are the following. First, ensure and provide safe drinking water supply through both short and long-term solutions. Second, reduce salt and nitrate loading so that ongoing discharges neither threaten to degrade high-quality waters nor cause or contribute to exceedances of water quality objectives. And third, implement long-term managed restoration of impaired water bodies. And specifically for nitrates, the goal focuses on restoration of groundwater quality. As mentioned here, CV salts consist of the two programs, one for nitrate, which addresses all species of nitrogen, and the salt program, which addresses salinity, including electrical conductivity, total dissolved solids, fixed dissolved solids, chloride, sodium, and sulfate. Focusing on the nitrate control program, this program is prioritized by groundwater basins, as shown with the color coding on this slide. The first basins being addressed, shown in red, pose the highest health risks associated with drinking water that exceed the nitrate primary maximum contaminant level. The next priority are those areas shown in orange, which generally have lower nitrate concentrations than priority 1, but are still elevated. The green areas are not currently prioritized, but discharges in those areas may be designated as a priority on a case-by-case basis. Discharging facilities are encouraged to enroll in Path B, which is a shared responsibility implementation, meaning you would join with other group of dischargers in these areas called management zones. For more information about which management zone your winery may be under, we encourage you to go to the CV Salts website, which is cvsalinity.org, or contact your permit writer. The salinity control program is a phased approach to reduce salinity impacts to drinking water supplies in the Central Valley. Dischargers must enroll in a permitting path, either Path 1, the conservative approach, or Path 2 for an alternative permitting approach. Dischargers are encouraged to enroll under the alternative permitting approach, which is a collaborative program led by the Salinity Coalition. Currently, Phase 1 of the alternative permitting approach is being implemented, which consists of the development and implementation of a region-wide prioritization and optimization study, or P&O study for short. Dischargers participating in the P&O study are not subject to conservative salinity limits, but are required to support the facilitation and completion of the study. And as a side note, almost all food processors and wineries permitted in the Central Valley have selected to participate in the alternative permitting approach. And as I mentioned before, more information can be found on the CV Salts website on how to enroll and the fee structure. And finally, I want to provide a list of contacts for the Central Valley region to begin the permitting process. And before I close out this side of the presentation, I just want to kind of repeat the main takeaway message that we have for our region. And that is, any questions you have about the process or to begin the permitting process, reach out to Water Board staff to answer your question. And with that, I guess we go back to Laurel.
Thank you, Scott. Really great presentation. We're just going to do a little bit of a wrap. If I can share my screen before we go to Q&A. Okay. Let's see. Rebecca, what do you see on the screen?
I see the what's coming up slide.
Okay, just the slide.
Yes.
Okay, thanks. So just a little bit statewide, what's coming up. This is the second to last winery webinar this summer. The next one is for the San Diego Regional Board or Region 9. That'll be on the 12th of this week at 10 a.m. And then, we're looking at, as Scott mentioned, there are potentially a significant number of wineries with waste discharges to land that have no water board permit for that discharge. And we've been looking at our facilities that got outreach letters. We sent 3,000 outreach letters last year or so, and we're looking at ones that actually have a potential to discharge to land. And we're looking at another outreach effort this winter or spring of next year. So that's coming up for statewide. And then, the wineries in California, they're in different buckets. Some don't even have a discharge to land. And then others that do, they might be just starting enrollment in the statewide order. And so they're looking at getting that application together, getting support for their site plan to comply with the order. And then there's a whole bucket that Scott got into, like Region 5 and other regions. They have very specific criteria for what their schedule is and what criteria wineries already have for permitting in the region. So make sure you kind of tune into what Scott was sharing on where you'd fall, where your facility would fall with existing permitting, and if the winery order would be eligible for your facility in the future. And then the last bucket is a few wineries. They already have enrollment in the statewide order, and so they're actually doing implementation. So they're doing monitoring, site upgrades, and they're actually looking at the first annual reports coming up sooner than later, maybe even next year. So I just wanted to note here, this is a slide of the reporting schedule per tier in the winery order, and there's a typo in the table in the order. The second semi-annual report, if you're doing groundwater monitoring, and the annual report it's April 1st, not March 1st, so you get that extra month. But so it's corrected in this slide, and they're actually looking at getting those reports together for the regional boards. So that brings us to Q&A, and what we're going to do here is take a short break to look at your questions. So this is a really good time if you've been waiting to get those questions into the Q&A. Thank you for waiting to see if it was answered in the slides. We're going to take a quick break to kind of go through those, and on the slide you can see what the Q&A icon looks like, and when you open that you'll see that little box there. Type in your question, and then we'll be just verbally answering those in the Q&A. I'll read out the question, and then we'll get a panel response. Yeah, and then I have a contact slide that kind of is a general contact slide to show while we do Q&A. All right, so yeah, we'll be back. So far there's not a lot of questions, so maybe just a couple minutes, panel, and we'll go from there.